Hello, welcome to week 3 of the ECE 9013 course. In this lecture, we will be discussing strings in more details and some of the operations that we can apply to. And we will also be exploring the bisection algorithm, which is typically used as a search or approximation method. In last week's presentation, we briefly presented the strings data type. We also discussed how to perform branching using if statements, if else statements, and if else statements. We also explored the use of while loops and for loops. This week, we will be discussing string manipulation, guess and check algorithms, approximate solutions or approximation algorithms, and specifically we will discuss the bisection method. So starting off with strings, as we mentioned in last week's presentation, a string is a sequence of case-sensitive characters that we can actually compare using regular comparison operators such as equal, less than, greater than, and so on. One of the most important commands that can be applied to a string variable is the length. So in this case, to determine the length of the string, we use the command len. So len is a function that is used to retrieve the length of the string in the parentheses. As an example, if we define s to be the string abc and then execute the command len of s, this will give us a result of 3. To index a character within a string, we use the square brackets as illustrated here. So we use square brackets to perform indexing in a string to get the value at a certain index or position. Note that the indexing in Python starts with 0. Therefore, if a string is made up of 3 characters, like the example here, the indices will be 0, 1, 2, if we are starting from the first character to the left. If we want to start the indices from the end of the string, we start with -3, -2, and so on. So if we start the index at the first character, it starts with a 0. If we are starting the index from the last character, we start it with a -1 and go back. So this example illustrates different ways of indexing a character within a string. One of the operations that we can apply to strings is slicing. So with slicing, we can actually determine the start point of the string that we would like to get, the end point, and the step. If we give 2 numbers, the step value will be by default 1, and this is similar to the structure when we will discuss the for loop. We can also omit numbers and leave just columns. So in this case, if we have the string variable s defined as such, starting with index 3, we count 0, 1, 2, 3. So we're starting at D, and we're stopping at 6 -1, because we always stop at the value less than that. So this will give us D, E, F. This is similar to using the structure 3, 6 with a step of 1. However, we can define it to be every other letter, so this statement would actually only extract or slice the variables D and F. If we use the double strings, it shows the complete string. If we do it with a step of -1, we actually inverse the order of the string. So we start with the last character and go back. And then this can also be done to go from the end of the string to its beginning, going backwards with a particular step. It is important to note that strings are immutable. That is, they cannot be modified. So for example, if we define the string variable s as such, we cannot change the variable using such a command. What we can do is actually create a new variable s and put at the index that we would like the character that we want. But this is equivalent to creating a new variable s, and the pointer now points to a new memory location. As shown in the previous week's lecture, for a for loop, we iterate over a set of values, so we can apply this to any set of values, not just numbers. So we can actually use the range function to iterate over a string, or rather than just a range of numbers. As such, here we are trying to print out whether there's a character I or U. This can be done in one of two ways. In the first is the traditional way in which we iterate over the numbers of the length of S, and we check every time whether the character at that index is I or U. Or we can actually do it in a more Pythonic way by iterating over the characters of the string. So in this case, we say for char, which is a variable, in the string S, if the character is I or U, then we print this statement. This is an example of how we can determine the number of AN letters or the number of A letters. So in this case, if we go through the code, we can actually replace the characters or the commands in red with one command. So in this case, rather than mentioning that while the length or while the index is less than the length of the word, and every time define the variable character or char to be the letter in the word at index I, what we can do is replace this with a for loop of char in the word that we have as an input, and then check if this character is in AN letters. We print that and we increase the number by 1, and this can help us reduce even slightly the size of the code. Another example here is we are counting the number of characters that are common between two different strings. So here we first check if the length of the strings match, because if they don't, then no need to check the number of common letters, because one of them would be larger than the other. Assuming they are, we can do a double for loop and check the common characters using this statement and break once we are done. Thank you.